through. Steve, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you all for joining today's TC54 meeting. I do not see any new attendees, so we'll skip that and go directly to the announcements.
Sorry, Steve, do you mind putting the notes in? I'm lost and can't find them on the Slack channel.
They're on the chat. They're on the chat, Alyssa, and I just started it by the date and adding some of the names.
What chat? The Zoom?
The
Can
Zoom
you put
chat,
the link
please?
in?
I did. Please have a look.
It's not there for me because I might have to join late. So do you mind putting the link again?
I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone have any announcements today?
No announcement, but I want to shout out thank you to Ollie for his presentation at Espomarama. It was really well done.
That was very well done. Yes. For those that do not know, Ollie, do you want to take a few moments to kind of tell the group what you did and some of the reception?
I did a lot of marketing. It's essential for the success of the TAPI that we get buy-in from every actor in the market, both customers and vendors, especially the platform vendors. So this was kind of a start to tell them where we're going, that it's going to be an Ecma standard, and describe very, very quickly, only had 10 minutes, where it fits in. And I think I got the message through. I got a lot of feedback afterwards. People have been coming up with details on our specs and other things. I hope we'll get a bit more energy in the working group. What I didn't say then, but I can say now, is we're planning a public meeting. We haven't planned the details because I have a conference Monday, Tuesday, but after that, we're going to have a larger meeting, like a 2-hour Zoom virtual meeting with the same ideas. Describe how this fit in, have speakers from dependency track that will discuss how they can integrate the stuff in their platform, and a few others. So we're doing a lot of reach out in order to make sure that people understand where our space is in this world.
And the presentation that you gave was last week at Espomarama in Denver, right?
Yeah.
And the recording of that has not yet been made available by CISA, to my understanding, but the presentations have, right?
Yeah. And that presentation, if I remember correctly, was attached to the notes. I showed some of it in last TC54 meeting. So you can find it in the notes here as well.
Yep. Very good. Well, thank you, Ollie, for the update. I wanted to quickly just brief everyone on some of the work that's going on in the feature working groups. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because I want to get to the updates for TC1 and TC2, as well as some documentation things that we're also working on. We initially started off with 3 different feature working groups. The FWGs in CycloneDX are basically small, like, task groups. Like, if we're working on a larger feature of the specification, we will spin up an FWG. We will work on that part of the specification. Optionally, we'll also work on an authoritative guide, or add to an existing guide, and then that group will spin down once things have been delivered. We started out with 3 FWGs to begin with. The threat modeling FWG, the blueprints, and the OSS sustainability. We've recently added a new one for patents. So that's just getting off the ground right now. But in the links here, we've got kind of the use cases and requirements docs that we always use for the FWGs. For the threat modeling one, this is kind of coming along very well. We've got the individuals, the projects, the commercial entities that support the threat modeling industry kind of behind this effort. So that's this is very, very promising. We are starting to make some progress, although we haven't actually we do not currently have any POCs today. some of the work that we're doing in for threat modeling is going to carry over to blueprints. One of the commonalities that we need to do when we're discussing threat modeling, as well as blueprints, which is the concept of architectural and behaviors. Both of those are very, very applicable to threat models, and being able to describe the architecture of something, being able to describe what that something should do. These are things that are usually inputs to a threat model. So we're going to be collaborating very closely, these two groups, because they have a vested interest in making sure that whatever they're working on is going to be compatible with what the other group is working on. So I'd encourage you to take a look at both of these documents. The OSS Sustainability Group, this one is not quite as far along yet. This is really concentrating on the sustainability of open source software. The general premise, besides trying to meet some of the language in the CRA, the general premise that we're trying to achieve here is when you consume an SBOM from maybe a supplier, or maybe you are producing a lot of SBOMs in your build environment through automation, starting to identify a lot of the open source that you might be using in an organization, and maybe those things are important to you. And it's really good to be able to identify those in a way where you can start giving back to that respective community or project. So that one is not quite as far along, but we do have some use cases, and there's some other documentation that we're going through. Salvia has been very he's got a lot of documentation that we need to go through. The patents FWG, this one is just getting started. So this one is certainly in its infancy. We've had one informal meeting, and the actual meetings I believe actually start next week, if memory serves. The general idea here is to, in a standardized way, list the patents that maybe you are asserting that you have for a given component, or maybe the patents that you are licensed to use. And there's all kinds of use cases around that. We're trying to get some legal folks involved, because security guys are probably not the right crowd to draft this part of the specification. So we're trying to rally some legal folks to join these calls, to be subject matter experts in the community. So for TC54 members, if this is interesting to you, I would highly encourage you to reach out to your legal teams and see if they might be interested in this kind of capability. There is no guarantee that any of these features will wind up in the next version of CycloneDX, but these are all the things that we're working towards. With that, I'll pause for any questions.
I just made a note here that sustainability work, if that's the same I've seen from CPAN Security, Salve.
Yeah.
It's really massive, but it fits beautifully in to the ORCWG. He's light years ahead of the rest, but it's really good work, both on terminology and the models he's discussing.
Yeah, he's been leading that effort from a community perspective, so he is certainly the subject matter expert. But yeah, we're really thankful to have him, participating in this. But these groups are open to anybody. These are community meetings. So if any of these things are of interest to you, I'll just pick one randomly. There are the meeting links. You'll have a link to the GitHub issue. In some cases, there's additional Google Docs. There's always a Slack channel that you can go. It's usually workstream dash whatever the name of the feature working group is. And then we have a list of the recordings that we publish on YouTube as well. So if any of these things are of interest to you, I highly encourage you or your organization to get involved.
I haven't found the proper application form. though.
The what?
The application form for receiving more than 24 hours a day. I'm
You
sorry.
have the same problem I do. Oh, I know. It's yeah, well, we'll take that offline, but it's been challenging. Time management has been challenging. Let's say that. Ole, could you give us an update on the work that TG1 is doing? Where are we? Where are we going?
TG1 is, I mean, we reached a general agreement on the architecture, the object model, and we're documenting object per object now, taken down. And from that work, we're gonna define the API, especially from, I would say, the artifact consumer side to start with, but directly after that, we have to look into publishing. This is all for what we call phase 1, where we basically distribute documents. Phase 2 will come later, where we actually need some more intelligence, so we can work with what we call insights, that is querying various artifacts for the content. Like, do I have any log4j in any of this? That kind of questions, or other questions from the bombs. But phase 1, I think we have a few objects we haven't defined, but those will be easy. Then it's about open API and start writing code. We have one very early open API specification that we need to update. We also produced some code to basically just test the object models. So we're making good progress, I think.
That's great. I know the OWASP dependency track project will adopt it. I was talking to an individual that has a commercial platform for SBOM sharing. They plan to adopt it. My employer is certainly looking at it. So I think this is great. This is good news. I've also had a lot of comments, just for your awareness, on the discovery aspects. People seem to love it. People love it. So I'm getting some really positive feedback on our current direction of what we have today and kind of where we're going. So I've had nothing.
That's good to hear. I haven't heard a lot about discovery, but I'm happy with it myself. But that's usually not enough. But thank you.
Yeah, no, that's just feedback that I've heard. I haven't heard any constructive feedback yet, but if I get that, I will certainly pass that along as well. I was on a podcast. It was recorded a day or two ago, and insights was one of the things that was brought up, along with the use case of limited transparency, right? Being transparent enough, like how much is too much, right? And what is just what is enough transparency so that your customers, right, your business partners, they have enough intelligence to make informed decisions, right? Where is that boundary? And I think the insights capability that we're going to be working on is going to, in my opinion, be that killer feature. So I'm really looking forward to that. Again,
yeah, it's an interesting question, because the when we talk about consumers, we talk about the far end, right? People buying in Best Buy or something like that. But you also have internal distribution of artifacts, and you have, like, if I'm a manufacturer and upstream board vendor, that's one very different relationship. Then I need it all.
right.
So we need to have different authorization models. That's going to be fun.
For sure. It is going to be fun. Now, this work is also community driven. We do have the regularly scheduled community meetings, as well as the TG1 meeting scheduled, right?
We're gonna start slowly with the TG1, so we learn and start with some formality, but we still haven't got any, I would say, documents to start working with in the TG1.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a slow-moving group that we're gonna ramp up at some point, I would say, in end of Q1, beginning of Q2 next year, so we can release our first version.
Let's we also, I think, have to keep in mind the I mean, we can always do it out of bounds, but really we've got that March timeframe if we want to get it in for July.
Yep.
And I'm assuming we probably have some kind of September timeframe if we want to get it in for December.
Yeah, July would probably be a good thing, because I do want to have a hackathon at one of the OWASP events as well.
Yeah, because the GA meetings are in July and December, and that's when the GA actually votes to ratify standards. But we need to get the documents in there a couple of months in advance. Now we can always do it out of band.
Yep.
I'd rather not if possible, but just kind of keep in mind, I guess, the time frame, the timelines in which Ecma operates.
On another note, maybe not related to that, but there is a lot of funding coming out now from the union to work on CRA related development, standard work and community work, which includes, interesting enough, membership in standard organizations.
Interesting.
Like Ecma.
That is really interesting. And secure by design is a requirement, as well as security requirements of the CRA.
Yep.
So yeah, all the things that we're actually working on.
In regards to SBOM, is kind of funny, because you're required to have an SBOM at least of the top level objects, dependencies, but you're not required to share it with customers.
Right.
But authorities, when they come in.
Exactly. Doesn't look like any other updates from you, Ole?
Nope.
It doesn't look like Philippe is here today. Let me just double check. No, it doesn't look like it. The work on TG2 is progressing. We've had 1 or 2 meetings so far. We are expanding the number of the organizations that participate, so that's a good thing. We are going to be looking at the existing Pearl 1 specification that's published on GitHub, and possibly tweaking that for the Ecma standard. I don't know at this point if they will have a version bump or not. Hopefully not. However, one of the things that is currently being discussed is whether or not we collapse name and namespace into just name. So that is currently being discussed. Now, if that actually happens, that would require a version bump. But we are discussing a few things. We've also during the last TG2 call, we discussed VERS as well, and the general direction that the TG provided to Philippe is that we merge in what currently is there for VERS. We specifically annotated that it's not a released version. Just because we merged it in doesn't mean it's like a 1.0 thing. Merge in what's currently there, and then for the few corner cases that we still need to flesh out, we will create very specific issues or PRs dedicated for those. Because if you look at the VERS PR right now, it's almost impossible to follow because there are so many comments. So that's where we are with that. I'll pause. Any questions for TG2? I would expect pretty much anyone who relies on package URL in terms of a strategy, you know, and if your organization relies on package URL as a universal identifier for your inventory management of all your third-party components, that you probably should want to pay attention to this. So I invite anyone to existing Ecma members to do this, participate in the TG2 calls. If you are not an Ecma member, highly encourage you to join so that your voice can be heard during these TG2 meetings. With that, Samina and I have been discussing documentation. And I know it's not the most exciting topic. However, there were a lot of struggles with the CycloneDX documentation, not necessarily producing the documentation. It was more or less producing it in a way that conformed to the Ecma style guide. And that style guide was really implemented in Microsoft Word, which yeah, we ran into a number of issues with OpenXML, as well as the readability of that in a cross-platform way. It's not really going to be sustainable in the future, that method. So we've been working with I can't remember her last name. Her name is Aki
Brown.
Aki Brown, and she is very, very active in TC39 JavaScript. And she's built essentially, I mean, they use their own Markdown, but it's called EC Markdown. That is not the important part. What the important part is that they've actually gone from a Markdown-like syntax directly to PDF without requiring Microsoft Word as an intermediary format. And the resulting PDFs are beautiful, right? They conform to the Ecma style guides. The build process looks very simple. Obviously, if you look at all the things under the covers, you realize that there was a lot of work that went into that went into making that thing so elegant. That solution that TC39 has so elegant. Anyway, I had a conversation with Aki and Samina, and Aki is willing to help TC54 out in terms of helping us be successful in generating automated documentation, PDF creation, skipping that whole Microsoft Word intermediary format thing. So I'm going to be working with her. Now, I haven't looked at the EC markup language specifically. However, if anyone is interested in taking a look at that, I would encourage you to do so. It's, I think, in the it's in the TC39 GitHub organization on GitHub. I will dig up the links for that and share them. But she has some style sheets, some CSS that she's developed, and some of that CSS also is the it's the print CSS that most of the browsers actually don't support. And we have a third-party solution that Ecma has subscribed to or purchased that actually does implement the print CSS standards. So with that, they were actually able to generate this this beautiful PDF. As a proof of concept, I didn't want to take CycloneDX. It's too big. It's like 800 pages or something ridiculous. I wanted to take something small. And package URL is currently the furthest along, as they already had a 1.0. So what I'm currently working on is a way to, and again, I haven't looked at EC markup or Markdown, whatever it is. I haven't looked at their syntax. What I did start with, however, was ASCII2Doc. ASCII2Doc is a standard from the Eclipse Foundation. Now, Eclipse is not necessarily a standards organization. However, they have this specification that is fairly widely used in documentation creation. And I took the liberty of starting with package URL and generating, now this obviously does not conform to the Ecma standards. However, using this, we basically have everything necessary here with the right CSS and the right tooling in place. We should be able to automatically generate, be able to automatically generate those PDFs. So that's currently where we're at. This is very, very experimental at this point. I have not checked any of this in. This is just local on my machine. But I'm going to be reaching out to Aki likely next week sometime and see if we can kind of meet up and discuss where we're at and where we'd like to be. Any questions for me on the documentation creation?
I guess I will have to learn, but I'll wait for your experimentation with Perl.
ASCII2Doc is pretty simple. I did not know it either. If you know Markdown, it's pretty simple. Markdown is not very Markdown doesn't really allow you to specify style or formatting.
No,
you
I'm using Markdown now with Pandoc,
right?
but all the formatting goes into some strange Pandoc input files.
Right. Yeah. With ASCII2Doc, you have the ability, I don't want to say formatting and style, but you certainly have the ability to nudge an interpreter and tell that interpreter what you want it to do. And that could be applying a CSS style, for example. Samina.
Thank you. Steve, just a comment. The work that Aki's done, yes, it's excellent. And by the way, the TC39 spec EC262 is over 800, 900 pages. So the tool she uses works well. The third-party tool, I have not yet closed that discussion, but it should be closed. But I think we would like to continue it for sure for TC39. And if it brings benefit also for TC54, it would be great to be able to do that. And Aki will be speaking and will be at W3C TPAC all of next week. If any of the people on this call are there, take a minute and also have a chance to talk to her. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing the link for EC Markup, Ale. So if anyone is interested in taking a look at their own markup language, again, this is very specific to, for the most part, JavaScript, right? It's a programming language. So there's going to be some things in here that, CycloneDX or package URL and whatnot, that we're not going to use, right? There's features in here that are really only applicable to them. However, if there's things in here that we can reuse, if we can reuse EC Markup in a way where it's, it's fairly elementary to do, then that might actually be a really easy path forward. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but if anyone wants to jump in and start experimenting, I would encourage you to do so and kind of let us know in the Slack channel if you do go down the rabbit hole. With that, are there any other questions on where we are with documentation? And we'll probably do the same thing with Koala as well.
Yeah.
So, all right. Does anybody have any? Well, let me give one more update, I guess. I mentioned it before, but the Common Lifecycle Enumeration Project, which is really a time series specification that captures events that happen in a product lifecycle. For example, a product being renamed, M&A is occurring, of course, all the lifecycle events, end of life and the support, end of guaranteed support, all that sort of thing. That work is coming along pretty well. Right now we are narrowing the scope a little bit in order to get some 1.0 kind of
Good.
right. So we're currently narrowing the scope because it's a very grandiose type of effort right now, and we're trying to bring that down to reality, something that we can get out the door and then of course build upon in the future. So once that work is more tightly scoped, which again I think we're almost there, I will be bringing that to TC54 to see if there is interest in spinning up a TG3 specific for that effort. With that, is there any other business that people wanted to bring forward?
I just want to emphasize that the life cycle enumeration keeps popping up in all kinds of discussions. So that's standard. And there are many other standard efforts as well, people who tried and gave up. So I think narrowing the scope, getting something out will be critical. We keep referring to it in Project Koala. I keep hearing about it in other places as well. So
yeah, the FDA has a requirement on end of life and the support, guaranteed support, all those sort of things for medical devices. You do not have to provide that information in an SBOM. I mean, it can be there, but it's not a hard requirement that you provide it in an SBOM, which is good because these types of events change all the time. You know, whether it's an open source project, a commercial product, doesn't really matter. Things become, you know, end of life and circumstances change, and maybe they are brought back for a period of time, and you know they go through this life cycle of different events. One of the interesting use cases that came to me the other day was around licensing, which again happens in both commercial and open source all the time, although the open source stuff is probably a little bit more interesting because it has a potential for much wider impact. You know, if I've got a range of versions of something that have one license, I might have a change of that license. Maybe it goes from MIT to AGPL during a certain range of versions, right? That's a life cycle event. So
but Berkeley DB, yeah,
exactly, it happens all the time.
But
so we're going to be capturing
the
those
funny
types of
part
events.
is that in the Cyber Resilience Act, you have something called the product's lifetime, during which you have to provide free security updates. And that lifetime can't be defined solely by the vendor. It's kind of fussy. But there will be some sort of end of free security updates as well.
Yeah.
So there will be input coming from the work done in relationship to European regulations as well.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to obviously the milestone events and having a time series, because having just a end of, that's actually not good enough, right? There's a life cycle, and an end of can change over time. And so it's really important that we capture that.
There is an interesting relationship to Skit, because Skit tries to manage in some ways a third party attestation of life cycle events as well. Because in some cases, when a company go bust or an open source project dies, someone else need to go in and inject something. So
the other aspect that I'm really looking forward to is, I'm not claiming that it's going to solve the naming problem. Naming is hard. However, there's a number of well-known corner cases, products being renamed, acquisitions, those types of things, where CLE can absolutely be a stopgap. They can fill in the gaps where naming is hard in these particular areas. So
OEM.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I'm really looking forward to that. So again, as soon as we get things more tightly scoped and we know exactly what we're going to do and why, I'll bring that back to TC54 so we can talk about spinning up TG3 for that. Any other topics that people wanted to bring up?
OWASP conference next week, I guess. AppSec.
OWASP, Global AppSec in San Francisco. I will be in San Francisco next week. So if you're in San Francisco, hit me up.
Stockholm.
There will be an announcement.
Conference.
Yeah, there will also be an announcement, I believe next week, on the time and location for OWASP Global AppSec EU, which will happen in the spring of 25. So I believe
Okay.
that announcement will be going out next week as well.
The same one as we had in Lisbon in June, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's not going to be in Lisbon this year. But that announcement should be going out next week as well. Anything else? Otherwise, we can give you back 20 minutes.
I'm good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time today. Have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you in some of these working groups.
The same.
Cheers.
Thank you, Steve. Ole, could
Bye.
you stay on the line for just 2 minutes?
Absolutely.